All right, so we've got a bit of a nail biter on our hands this week.
Oh, yeah.
With this whole government shutdown thing.
Definitely a lot going on.
Looming. And Friday, March 14th is the day.
Yeah, that's the drop dead date everyone's talking about.
That's right. 2025 could be the year we see a partial shutdown, and that's a pretty big deal.
Huge. Could have ripple effects all over the place.
And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive, to really break it down for everyone.
Absolutely. Make sense of it all.
You've sent over a ton of articles, a whole briefing document, really good stuff.
Yeah, I tried to pull together the key pieces.
And our mission here is to pull out the most important insights from it all. Like, what's at the heart of this standoff? What are the real stakes? And why does it matter now? Like right this second.
Right now. Yeah, the urgency is definitely there.
Yeah.
And looking at all this material, it's like the clock is ticking.
It is.
March 14th, that's not just some date on the calendar.
Yeah.
It's a real pressure point.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay, let's talk about that ticking clock. March 14th, that's D-Day. Now, what the Republicans in the House are putting forward is this 6-month stopgap funding bill. It's called a continuing resolution, or CR.
Right, the CR, yeah.
Basically, it's to keep things running, the lights on, at the same funding levels they are now, until September 30th. But here's the catch. Right from the get-go, this CR was drafted and passed just by the Republicans in the House.
Yeah, that's a crucial point.
It didn't involve the Democrats at all.
So right off the bat, it's like, are they trying to set up a roadblock? I mean, it makes you wonder about their strategy.
Exactly. So let's get into that Republican strategy. What Speaker Mike Johnson is aiming to do is get this CR through the House with Republican votes only. And they have a super slim majority, 218 seats to 214 for the Democrats.
So tight margins, very tight.
Super tight, meaning he can only lose just one Republican vote if everyone shows up. I mean, talk about walking a tightrope.
Yeah, no room for error there.
And then you have President Trump wading right in.
Yep.
He's been all over Truth Social, urging House Republicans to vote yes on this thing. And one article even pointed out that he used please in one of his posts.
Oh, wow.
Which, for him, that's kind of unusual, right?
Yeah, not exactly his typical style. Usually a little more forceful, you could say.
Exactly. So it makes you think maybe getting those yes votes isn't as easy as he'd hoped.
Maybe some pushback behind the scenes.
And on top of the Truth Social posts, apparently he's been making calls too.
Wow. Working the phone.
Yeah, applying the pressure. And to make matters even more interesting, Vice President J.D. Vance was actually scheduled to go and meet with House Republicans, specifically to get them on board with the CR.
So a full court press to get this thing through.
Full court press, absolutely. But here's the thing. Like we see all the time, getting everyone on the same page, well...
It's tough.
You've got Representative Thomas Massie coming out strong saying, and I quote, "I'll be a NO on the CR this week."
Whoa, okay, strong statement.
Yeah, no mincing words there. And his reason, no spending cuts. That's his line in the sand.
Gotta admire his commitment to fiscal discipline, at least.
Right. But then, on the other hand, you've got Representative Eric Burleson. He seems to be leaning towards a yes.
Interesting.
And apparently, this is after getting some assurances from Trump's team about cutting spending down the road. So, a little more willing to play the long game, maybe.
Yeah, more strategic approach, perhaps.
And then you have Representative Ralph Norman. He's a yes on the CR. But his reason, it's really specific. He says he's got faith in President Trump and the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to tackle the national debt.
DOGE, that's the one that's been making headlines.
That's the one. So, even within the Republican Party, you've got this whole spectrum of opinions.
Yeah, and that internal dynamic is so important to understand. I mean, you've got different groups, each with their own priorities. Some are all about cutting spending right now, no matter what. Others, maybe they're more in line with Trump's big picture or willing to take his word about future cuts.
It's fascinating, really.
It is. It shows you how hard it is to keep everyone happy, even when you have a tiny majority like they do.
For sure. Okay, so now let's switch gears and talk about how the Democrats are reacting. And I think it's fair to say they're not thrilled.
Not thrilled is putting it mildly from what I've seen.
Yeah, both in the House and the Senate, it's been overwhelmingly negative. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he didn't hold back. He said, House Democrats will not be complicit in the Republican effort to hurt the American people.
Wow, okay, laying down the law.
And went on to say that the bill is not something we could ever stand.
No ambiguity there. It's a hard no. And that kind of unified front from the Democrats, that's a big deal. This isn't just a little disagreement. It's a full-on rejection of the whole Republican plan. And that can really throw a wrench in the works when it comes to getting things done in Congress.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And they have a whole list of reasons why they're against it. First and foremost, they were completely left out of the drafting process. Senator Alyssa Slotkin was pretty blunt about it. She said, House shouldn't count on their votes for a bill they weren't involved with.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how things are supposed to work, at least in theory, right? You get input from both sides, bipartisan effort, all that.
In a perfect world.
Exactly. But then you get into the nitty-gritty, and there are these massive disagreements about how the money should be spent. Like, the bill bumps up defense spending big time, like we're talking $892.5 billion. But then it slashes non-defense discretionary spending down to $708 billion.
So a huge increase for defense, but big cuts everywhere else.
Huge. And that has Democrats really worried. Senator Patty Murray brought up some really important points. She's concerned about what these cuts would mean for programs fighting things like fentanyl and substance abuse. And then there's the impact on research at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. They do crucial work on things like Alzheimer's, vaccines, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, those are some serious concerns. And this really gets to the heart of the ideological differences between the two parties. Republicans, they often push for a strong military. So that increase in defense spending, that's not surprising. But those cuts to all those domestic programs, that's what Democrats typically fight for. They see those programs as vital, and they're going to push back hard against any cuts.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. Another thing the Democrats are really worried about is that this bill would give the Trump administration way too much power over how the money gets spent. Like, they could potentially bypass Congress, which is supposed to have oversight.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Checks and balances, right? That's how the system is designed to work.
Right. Senator Murray even went so far as to say it could create slush funds for the Trump administration to reshape spending priorities.
So basically, they're saying the administration could just take the money and use it however they want, regardless of what Congress intended?
Exactly. And they're particularly worried about things like Army Corps of Engineers projects, military construction, transit improvements, things that Congress might have specific plans for, but the administration could just come in and change it all.
Yeah, that kind of power struggle between the executive branch and Congress, that's a constant tension. And in this case, with the Democrats already feeling like they're being shut out of the process, they're extra wary of giving the Trump administration that kind of free rein.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And then, of course, there's DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency that everyone's talking about. Democrats are really pushing for what they call guardrails when it comes to any spending related to this department, especially because Elon Musk is supposedly involved somehow.
Oh, yeah, the Musk connection. That adds another layer of complexity.
It does. Senator Slotkin was pretty clear about it, saying they need assurances that the money will be used the way Congress wants it to be used, not just according to DOGE's recommendations. And then there's some specific cuts that are raising eyebrows, like the reduction in Washington, D.C.'s local funding. That could really hurt essential services there.
Yeah, that's going to have a direct impact on people's lives.
Exactly. And to top it all off, Democratic leaders are saying this bill doesn't do enough to protect programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those are the big ones, the safety net for so many people.
Those are non-negotiables for a lot of Democrats. They're going to fight tooth and nail to protect those programs.
Absolutely. And it's not just talk. We even saw a protest by that progressive group, Indivisible. One of the protesters, Linda Gabus, was urging Democrats to vote against this bill, even if it means a shutdown. So they're getting pressure from their base.
Yeah, that grassroots pressure, that can be a big motivator for politicians.
Definitely. And it's interesting, while Hakeem Jeffries has been very vocal about his opposition, from what I've read, he hasn't definitively said that every single House Democrat will vote no.
Could there be a little wiggle room there?
Maybe. It's possible some Democrats in districts where they're facing tough re-election battles might be thinking twice about a hard no.
Yeah, political reality sometimes forces you to make tough choices.
Absolutely. Now, even if, by some miracle, this CR manages to pass the House, it faces a massive uphill battle in the Senate. To overcome a potential filibuster, it needs 60 votes. And with the Senate split 53 Democrats to 47 Republicans, and with at least one Republican, Senator Rand Paul, already saying he's a no on this because of the spending, that means they would need at least 7 Democrats to vote yes.
So they need a significant chunk of Democrats to break ranks.
Exactly. And based on how vehemently Senate Democrats have been speaking out against this bill, I mean, Senator Mark Warner even called it awful. Getting those 7 votes seems pretty unlikely.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. But, Senator Susan Collins did point out the serious consequences of a shutdown. So maybe that will weigh on some senators' minds.
Maybe. So what could happen next? Well, the House could pass the bill, and then it dies in the Senate, which would probably trigger a shutdown at least partially. Or the House Republicans could be forced to go back to the drawing board and come up with a plan B, maybe one that actually involves negotiating with the Democrats.
Yeah, that would be a welcome change, right?
It would. There's also the possibility that the Senate could amend the bill and send it back to the House.
Yeah.
But with that Friday deadline looming, they'd have to move fast.
Talk about a time crunch.
A real nail-biter. And while a short-term extension to keep things funded temporarily seems like it would make sense, from what we're hearing publicly right now, that doesn't seem to be the direction things are headed.
So it's kind of all or nothing at this point.
It seems that way. And there's even been some talk of, get this, a jamming strategy. Basically, the House would pass the bill and then just, leave, adjourn, put all the pressure on the Senate to either pass it as is or face the shutdown. It's a risky move, but it shows you how high the stakes are.
Yeah, high stakes, high pressure.
All right, so let's recap the key takeaways here. We've got a temporary funding bill that passed the House, but only because Republicans voted for it. Democrats are totally against it, both in the House and the Senate. They hate the spending priorities, the boosts for defense, the cuts to domestic programs. They're worried about giving the Trump administration too much power over spending. And they're not crazy about the whole DOGE situation.
And on top of that, they were totally excluded from the whole process, which just adds fuel to the fire.
Right. And with that Friday the 14th deadline just around the corner, the Republican plan is facing some major roadblocks, especially when it gets to the Senate and that 60-vote rule.
So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of tension, and a lot of potential for things to go sideways.
And why should you care about all of this? Well, a government shutdown, it's not just some political game in Washington. It can have a real impact on your life. We could see federal workers furloughed, which means they're temporarily out of a job. Government services that people depend on could be disrupted. And there's the potential for economic instability. So by understanding what's going on, the different sides of the argument, the power dynamics, you get a better sense of how all of this could actually affect you. So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Given how dug in both sides are, how divided everything is, what do you think is the most likely way this gets resolved before that Friday deadline? And what happens if this kind of brinkmanship, this going down to the wire, becomes the new normal for funding the government? What does that mean for the future? Maybe spend some time thinking about the key players we talked about, Speaker Johnson, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, President Trump. What they do next, it could determine the whole outcome. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Appreciate it. It's been a wild ride. Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack. And we'll be back next week to see what happens.
Looking forward to it.